All right, I see we have a big crowd. This is recorded, so I'll start slowly when everyone is joining. So welcome to our webinar on modernizing reporting with microservices. Modernizing your report solution is critical for several reasons. Improved efficiency, you can automate many manual reporting tasks, freeing up your team's time to focus on more strategic work. Enhanced scalability with microservices, you can easily handle large volumes of data and user requests, making them ideal for growing businesses. And reduced cost, of course, with microservices, you can save money on infrastructure and maintenance. So reporting microservices can be used, as I'm describing just there, to modernize pretty much any reporting. So it could be financial reports, generating timely, accurate financial reports, helping you make better decisions about your businesses, generating invoices at scale, automating the process of generating these, and sending invoices even for large volume of transactions and customers, users. Embedded analytics of microservices. Reporting engines can be used to embed interactive reports and dashboards into web applications. And schedule reporting, of course, to generate and distribute reports on a schedule base, ensuring your team always has the latest information. So today, I'm really delighted to have Theodore Denshu, founder and architect of JasperReports open source project at Jaspersoft. I've seen in LinkedIn he's just turned 20 years in Jaspersoft, so delighted to have you here, Theodore. I am Raphael Peguet. I'm a solution engineer. I've been in Jaspersoft not as long as Theodore, but for a good few years already. So before we start, I just want to point out that this presentation is being recorded. So we will share the slides and recording after the presentation. And if you have any questions, comments during this presentation, we have a Q&A section. So please make sure to use the Q&A section so we can answer some of these questions at the end of this presentation. And we can also follow up with you after the presentations if we don't have time to cover everything. All right, so let's get started.
Thank you, Raphael. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to see, what were the main reasons that, made us get into the reporting microservices, technology. What are the main benefits? How do we see this working, and how can help bring value to applications out there and to enterprises and all the people who need this type of functionality into a Microsoft-oriented environment. We'll take a look at a little bit of the architecture that is behind this reporting microservices. And we're going to see how they work. There'll be a short demonstration from Raphael using this reporting microservices from Jaspersoft. And then we'll scale all up and talk about, the throughput that can be generated through these reporting microservices when going into a cluster environment and where everything scales up depending on demand and all that stuff. Raphael will also show us how to get started with JasperReports IO, where to get the products, how to deploy them, and provide more information on that front. And at the end, we'll take some questions. With that being said, we can start and talk a little bit about where the reporting functionality comes from, at least in our case at Jaspersoft. All right, let's talk a little bit about reporting. If you ask different people what they see as being reporting functionality, you might get different answers. But I usually summarize this by saying that with reporting, we should be able to produce any kind of document out of any kind of data. And this is what we can do with the reporting engine that we have started with at Jaspersoft many, many years ago. We started with this Java library that offered reporting functionality to Java applications. And it was embedded into Java applications. So in order to make use of this reporting functionality, users had to make use of a Java API inside their own Java applications that they were developing. So it was a library that was, offering reporting functionality to developers that were creating other applications that need that. Now, this reporting engine is, as I mentioned, data agnostic. I mean, we can use any kind of data. Obviously, most of the time it's about data that sits in relational databases like Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, DB2, or whatever. But it can also be CSV files, Excel files, XML files, JSON data, anything that can be consumed as a data source. Our engine has this ability to consume all these data sources. And if there's any exotic data in some shape and form, there could be easily implemented a custom data source to consume that type of data. So we covered this area pretty well. Now, in terms of what kind of documents we can produce, well, it can be, very, very complex documents with visualizations like charts, maps. But oftentimes it's about putting together different types of content, tables, crosstabs, listings, together with highly visual representations. And these are put together using complex templates that can be designed visually using visual designers. I mean, we have an application that people can use and visually design in what you see is what you get manner, all these documents that they need to produce. So by means of aggregation and nesting report templates by use of sub-reports and all that stuff, you can imagine we can basically achieve any kind of complex document. And these documents can range from simple listings, tables, and can go up to invoices, or maybe even very specific documents like train tickets or labels on packages with barcodes. Everything can be generated using this system of visual templates and this reports. Well, it's about document formats, and of course, when pixel perfect quality is one of the main goals, of course, we think of PDF. I mean, PDF is the file format that we mainly target because of its high quality in terms of visual representation. But we support also any other popular format like Word, Excel, OpenOffice, and of course HTML, because most of the time nowadays documents like this are consumed in web environments and where HTML is the standard. How big reports can be? Well, size is not a limit. I mean, there could be use cases where people need to generate huge documents with tens of thousands of pages. I mean, one question would be, well, who reads a document with 10,000 pages? But that's not the point. I mean, there's automation involved, there's archiving. So there are really cases where documents run in thousands and thousands of pages. And the reporting engine supports that by means of what we call virtualization. I mean, we generate so many pages, but we don't keep them all in memory at any one time. We only work with a couple of hundred pages in memory, and everything else is swapped on temporary files on disk, which allows us to basically generate huge documents and consume, not little memory, but a reasonable amount of memory. I already mentioned that we can output visualizations ranging from tables, crosstabs, data structures like that, but also charts and maps and custom visualizations. I mean, sometimes there are very specific visualization requirements with drawings and very particular gauges and thermometers and, visualizations that are produced by third-party vendors, which we can integrate into our own documents by means of custom components, as we call them. And of course, oftentimes, if not a rule, documents that are produced need to be translated in different languages. So internalization is a built-in feature of a good reporting engine. So we had all that in a Java library that we started with many years ago. So what were the main reasons for us to move to microservices? Why did we end up having a microservice for that? Well, it's about technology, right? With the product that exposed a Java API and only being used inside Java applications, we kind of had a limited use of that kind of product, but we recognize that the need of such feature is, exists in other platforms, in other technologies. So we wanted to expose let's say, a successful Java API to other platforms like PHP, .NET, Ruby on Rails, whatever. So on top of a Java API, we came up with a REST API. So our reporting functionality was all of a sudden available by means of a REST API, which can be used from any other platform. What was the criteria when putting together this REST API? So it had to be simple to use. It had to offer, all the leverage to what existed behind the scenes in terms of reporting, ranging from the way you provide the data to the way you consume the output. So we had this REST API put together. Then it had to be about interactivity. Most of the time, when people consume REST API, they consume it in a web environment where interactivity is a key feature. Like, for example, if you look at a table displaying orders, customer orders or whatever, you would maybe want to sort by clicking on the header in a column and sort by that column. Or you want a basic drill down, drill through functionality by using links to move from one document to another and explore the information that you need to consume there. When it comes to visualizations in web, it's also about embedding these. I mean, we offer reporting functionality, but the overall system has many, many other features. And, the content that we offer and generate needs to be embedded into existing larger applications. And the way to do that is by means of JavaScript. So we have REST API, but interactivity is mostly about JavaScript. So we also had to offer a REST API for embedding these visualizations into other applications. All this is good, but what is behind the scenes there? Well, it has to be a service that is lightweight, small, and can scale independent from other functionality in the system. And this is how we came up with this microservice, which uses a small footprint web server, and it's designed from ground up to be scalable depending on which type of functionality is needed more at certain moments in time, because we'll see later on reporting involves certain types of operations that consume more or less CPU or memory, and they would need to scale up independent of one another. So we'll take a look at that. What I want to point out is that the microservice had to be built with scalability in mind from ground up. And this is what we achieved, and we'll see how we achieve that. All right. I already mentioned that in order to embed reporting functionality, there are two sets of APIs, the REST API and the JavaScript API. And this is what people use when embed a reporting microservice like the one we offer at Jaspersoft, called the JasperReports IO. But we treat it as a black box, because behind the scenes, it can be deployed in different ways. It can be deployed, like a standalone single application, or it can be a cluster that is, hosted in the cloud and can scale up much better. And from a consumer point of view, they look the same because they expose the same REST API and the same JavaScript API. So if you start small, let's say with a single instance, you grow with your product, you can easily switch to a cluster-based version of the reporting service, and you don't have to change anything. They work basically the same. We treat it like a black box. Now, in terms of how this black box kind of reporting service works behind the scenes, well, it's up to it to go fetch the data. I mean, it connects to the data that is used for reporting on its own. Usually, this is the typical scenario because the reports have, for example, SQL queries in them. And it's the reporting engine behind the scenes that executes those queries and fetches data and mixes them with the report templates and the other resources that are placed into this repository, where you have your report templates, sub-reports, images, fonts, and style sheets, and everything that makes up those rich documents that have to be generated and delivered to the client that made the request. So behind the scenes, these are the two main services that we rely on: a repository for templates and metadata, reporting metadata, basically, and of course the data sources that fuel up these reports. It's true that there are cases where the data is actually sent by the caller, but I mean, you could send not only parameters but chunks of JSON data, and your reports would have everything they need when you call them, right? There are different scenarios, but the overall architecture is like this, with a repository and data sources behind a black box reporting service. Now, let's take a look at the way to make use of a interactive reporting microservice like the one we have at Jaspersoft. JasperReports IO is supposed to be like a commodity or like any other service that is available inside your local network. I mean, the parent application is the one that is exposed to the end users, and custom clients and guests connect to this web application, and they interact with this web application that is embedding behind the scenes the reporting microservice. And I say it's like a commodity because, like any other web application that uses databases behind the scenes, this is how we recommend the reporting service to be used. Just like a database that it's not available to the outside world. The web application is communicating both with the data source and the reporting service behind the scenes, and these services are not available outside. Now, the way, because reporting, as mentioned before, involves interactive visualizations, and this interaction between the end user and the visualization produced by the microservice has to be not simulated, but in a way, it has to be proxied. Like the end user needs to have this impression that they are really interacting with the reporting microservice directly, but they're not actually doing that. It's the parent application that embeds the reporting microservice, which acts like a proxy. You never interact with the reporting microservice directly, and there's a main reason for that. We keep saying microservice, but why do we call it microservice? Because our intention was to create a service that does only one thing and does it very well. And we wanted this microservice to do only one thing, reporting, but do it very well. And when we say the reporting microservice is doing only one thing, it means that it doesn't deal with security at all. So then whose responsibility for security when it comes to the reporting microservice? It's the responsibility of the parent application that embeds or leverage the microservice. So when people go to the world-facing web application, they most likely log into that application. So they interact with that application in a secure way. And it is the security layer of the parent application that protects the microservice as well, because the recommended way is to surface into the parent application the REST API that the reporting engine exposes by means of proxy. So from the outside, it looks like I'm making the REST calls that I'm, supposed to against the reporting microservice behind the scenes, but they are made to the parent application first, and it proxies them internally to the report microservice behind the scenes after, security layer has been, dealt with or applied. And this is the typical use case scenario that we recommend, and we are going to see it at play in the demonstrations that we're going to see. With that, I think it's time to look at a short demonstration by Rafael.
Yes, thanks, Theodore. This is really good because yes, running JasperReports IO is not like running JasperReports server in production, at least. So I have the challenge now. I have 5 minutes to run 10,000 invoices. The use case, I need to produce pixel perfect electricity, water bills, to send these bills every month, and I have a large population. So my requirements in this demo will be, I will need invoices that always look good. So I never get like a single total line on the second page or things like this. And I'm using JasperReports for that. So that will work. I need fully automated processes, so I don't need someone to run it manually and risk maybe delays or errors during some months. And I need an engine that can run on small machines. So I don't need to invest a lot of hardware and pay large fees for a SaaS environment. So we have a pretty report sample. It's using JSON data as a data source, and it's getting more and more, because it's getting more and more common nowadays to have JSON data as data sources for reports. So that's what I picked for this invoice today. And we need to include both the water and electricity information in the bill in one invoice. So I have sub-reports, so a little bit of complexity into this template with images in background and sub-reports in the detail band for those of you who knows. All right, so this is the requirements. I'm running this virtual machine, so I think it works. I split the screen, so I have created a little Python script that creates sessions to generate 10,000 invoices. I've practiced a little bit before, make sure it works. We'll see if we get the 285 seconds as before. So my Python script is here, and I'll just run it now. All right, and in the script, I print every 100 reports or invoices generated. I print how much time it took. So it's already pretty quick. In my folder, I already start seeing the reports being generated in the face model there. I can see 500, 600 items. So bills are being printed. Let's look into the script a little bit. So in this line, I'm setting the number of invoices. So I did run this Python script to generate 10,000 reports. And so I have a loop there at the bottom, this one that will just run these in different sessions. So that's why I'm using Python there. It's pretty easy. I create a session for each report execution. The JasperReports. So I'm running JasperReports. It's available on JasperReports IO. It's available on my 8081 port. And JasperReports IO is a microservices, but we do have docs page, so I can see it in the UI with a nice introduction, configuration, recommendation, so you can get started pretty quickly. And I can look into the API. So we have REST API, JavaScript API samples, again, to get started quickly. So let's look into, so JasperReports IO supports Open API 3.0. So we do have Swagger definition. So easily we can look into this, this API. And let's see what I'm using here as a license, because JasperReports IO can limit the number of concurrent report execution. So just for this demo, I'll double check that I have 10 concurrent report executions. All right, response 10. So I do use today for this demo, 10 concurrent executions. So that means I have a buffer and I run 10 invoices. And then when one of them is generated, then I can take one more. With the API, very quickly, we can look. So we have the synchronous report execution. That's what I'm using today, the API with the path and the format. So PDF documents here. But we also support asynchronous calls. So can request to run a report asynchronously, passing some parameters, report parameters into the body. And then with subsequent call, I can check the execution status, whether when it was executed, or we can delete different, and we can export and then eventually download this execution. So JasperReports IO from a REST API perspective is able to retrieve all of this to the API. Let's go back to our script. So we've already generated 7,000 invoices, 7.5. Let's look at these invoices. So I already have a few of them there in my folder. And so I can see here that it's not like magic script just duplicating PDFs, pretending I have an invoice for a specific user. So I'm adding a little number at the end of the name and a different invoice number. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. But if I take a different invoice, maybe the 7,500, then now it's 131021 invoice number. And my user changes. So these are actually generated one by one by JasperReports IO. And I think we're nearly there. Only 700 left. All right, so I'll leave it to finish, I think, maybe another 10 seconds, just to see it until the end. Yes, 273 seconds there to generate my 10,000 invoices. Excellent. All right, so pretty impressive on my small machine. Oh yeah, that's what I could have shared as well with you. I'm using a VM here, so with some virtual cores. And now, Theodore, is there any way to do even better than these 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's go at scale. So what we've seen here is one type of distribution of JasperReports IO. We call it the professional distribution. Basically, it's a single web application that runs as a service on port 8080, like Raphael showed. So it's a small Jetty server there that you can boost memory to and put it on a stronger machine or whatever, but it doesn't scale. It's just a single machine. So if we need to generate even more documents than what we've seen so far, we need to deploy JasperReports IO in the form of a cluster. So inside a cluster, we have this ability to, grow with demand and boost our capabilities depending on what kind of functionality is required at any moment during the execution of reports, and we'll see the different services involved into that. Also, Raphael mentioned that during his demo, he was using an execution throttle of 10 concurrent executions at any moment. That's because, with a smaller machine, you want to, execute reports from a certain queue in the order that they arrived. You don't want to deny access to anybody making a request. So you just schedule them and you take them as, resources permit. So this is a type of throttle that it's controlled. We control it also by license. But when you want to go big scale, such type of throttling is, not necessary, let's say. So there's no throttling like that in a cluster environment where only the sky is the limit. If you have the scale needed to go unlimited, let's say. I will explain now how the architecture looks like in the scalable version of JasperReports IO. So if we move to the next diagram, Raphael, here we have a diagram of JasperReports at scale in which we differentiate the different types of functionality that are involved in producing documents like that. First of all, these rectangles on the sides represent basically different types of workers inside the cluster. So everything starts with the workers that take care of the REST calls that are made to the microservice. So everything comes into our system by means of a REST API call. So we have workers that take up incoming requests and deliver the output. So this can scale independent of other services. They are the so-called JasperReports IO REST workers. The requests that are coming in are put in a queue, as we mentioned, but this queue is not limited. It can, receive as many requests as possible, and this is managed by the what we call the JRIO manager. This is a single instance worker. It doesn't scale up because it doesn't need to. The JRIO manager doesn't do much. It just manages the queue. So even in the case of accidental crash of this manager, a new worker of this type is created, and it simply picks up what the old one has left over. So it's not critical in that sense. Another important functionality is the so-called reporting functionality, which we oftentimes refer to as report filling. The report filling is this service that mixes data with reporting templates or reporting metadata. So it's the actual engine that generates these visualization, these documents. But they're generated in what we call an internal proprietary format. It's basically an in-memory object representing the generated document. We call this report filling, and much of the computing power and memory is used in this stage of report execution, report filling. This is why workers of this type need to scale independently, because most of the time they need more CPU. They work with memory more. They perform virtualization. So this is probably the most scalable piece in all this cluster. And the last piece of the puzzle, let's say, is the export service, what we see here, GRIO export at the bottom. It's the service specialized in converting documents from our proprietary in-memory format to whatever output format has been required, mostly HTML, but PDF, of course, we've seen in the demo, Word format, Excel, OpenOffice, rich text format. Pretty much all the popular document formats we are capable of producing, and it is this specialized service that takes care of that. And because of its specific characteristics and needs, it scales independent of the other type of workers. Just to mention that all these workers communicate with each other by means of a replicated cache that sits at the center of the diagram, where we see Redis. Redis is a caching technology, cluster ready. And we use it for its replicating cache capabilities, because this is how our workers in the cluster communicate with each other. And of course, like mentioned before, the whole reporting cluster, access data directly by connecting to external data sources, and leverage repository, where all the reporting metadata in the forms of report templates, fonts, images, and other resources are stored. All right, I'm handing over to Rafael again.
Okay, so I'd better start working on an upgraded version of my demo with this at-scale engine for next time. So actually, we've put JasperReports IO at scale already. The engineering team did, and we actually managed to run 100,000 reports, and they were just not just like one page's invoices like I did. They were like 20, 30 or more pages report. And we executed 100,000 page reports, and actually we had issues saving that because some local hard drive was not fast enough to store all these reports, so we had to use a S3 bucket in AWS. And all of these reports were generated in 2 hours, and we've calculated that it was about €2, a bit less than €2 in environment cost, so extremely efficient. I just want to show now how to get started with JasperReports IO. So I'll come here, and so in jaspersoft.com/trial, you can find the installers for Windows, Mac, Linux. And JasperReports IO Professional available 30-day trial. So you can download it. And once it's downloaded, I've already done that before, then you can run it, any of these. And I'm using a Mac here, so I can simply export this and place it into my applications. And now I have JasperReports IO, that's the new one I have. And with the start script, I can actually open this script with my favorite text editor, make sure I allocate enough memory. If I need more, I can add more than 256 megs. I think in my local environment, I'm using 2 gigs or more even, just to make sure it runs all the pages. And once you've done that, what I like to do as well is open this in the terminal, add a new folder, and simply just run start. And that's what I've done already here. Yes, in the start sh, I can also make sure that I'm using a port which is not already in use. And then I have here, I've already started my JasperReports IO locally. And it's 9 seconds, it started, and now it's ready. So I can go into, like I showed, localhost, and this is JasperReports IO running. So pretty easy to get started. And once you have it installed, then you can do like generating invoices, at least for the pro version. But also we've created, so we do have JavaScript samples, and actually they work with my local instance, and with JasperReports IO trial environments, it comes with lots of samples, so I can actually show that. So like a simple report rendering. So all our samples use jsfiddle.net, so a very popular tool to run sample reports, to run any JavaScript, HTML with some CSS if needed. So now I have high chart samples. Now with my JasperReports IO configuration, and with this code, I can ask to print my report in the container called report container. So I have the div ID report containers in my HTML. I can actually make this a bit bigger. And when I do that, then I can handle errors, and then this is what would be printed now in that specific container. If I want to go a bit further, do you have an idea, Theodore, there on what I can?
Yeah, you can
report?
show the one with passing parameter, or yeah. I take this opportunity to answer one of the questions that came in on the channel, on the Q&A. Is JasperReports IO embedding somehow related to Visualize.js to render reports on website? The answer, yes, they are related. Actually, the JavaScript API that we're showing to embed reports is actually a subset of Visualize.js. For those familiar with Visualize.js from JasperReports server product, yes, what we see here is a subset of Visualize.js, and it's actually only the part that has to do with displaying reports interactively, because Visualize.js is much more than that. But in this particular case, we extracted only the API and the JavaScript API that deals with showing reports in interactive mode. Also, when it comes to the REST API, the REST API that is used by JasperReports IO is also a subset of the REST API that JasperReports server itself exposes, because this type of interactivity we also are seeing with JasperReports server. So yes, it's a subset of these two. All right. Do you want to take more questions now, Rafael?
Yes, we actually have quite a few questions. Thank you for posting all of these questions in the Q&A section. So we'll cover as much as we can today and live, and then we'll get back to you for separately for those questions we cannot answer live. So we actually had the questions on special connectors for NoSQL databases. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, well, I'm not very familiar with the big data, but we do have this MongoDB connector that we ship with our products. I'm not I think we have also BigQuery connector as well. Maybe you know more about these, Rafael. What I can say is that. Yes. What I can say is that what I've seen, I mean, it's my personal opinion, might not be accurate nowadays, but what we've seen in the big data industry, let's say, while it started with NoSQL, then slowly, some of these big players in the big data have adopted SQL drivers. So they have implemented JDBC drivers eventually. So in a way, we rely on these drivers to connect. And as long as there are drivers that work through JDBC, we can leverage that. And for those who are offering vendor-specific connectors, we have implemented data sources and query executors on top of those. The only example that I have in mind is MongoDB, because I worked with it a little bit recently. But other than that, are you familiar with others, Rafael? I don't recall.
Yes, I think you answered pretty well. JasperReports IO is based on Java, so we any kind of JDBC drivers is good. We've seen that we can also read JSON data. It's the same with XML. If you have, we do have a CSV connector or Excel. And then for other data sources, then there are different options, whether we have connector, JDBC connector for these NoSQL databases that exist nowadays. I know Progress or some vendors actually have these connectors, and then often when you have data in one more exotic source, as I would say, or even more data sources, you can have a virtualized data layer in between those sources and Jaspersoft. So I'm thinking about Trino. We're supporting Trino now, open source data virtualization engine. So we can read your data. It's sometimes it's on a case by case, but we'll manage to read the data. Jaspersoft has a lot of experience with reporting, and with JasperReports IO, we are using the experience we have already for so many years with JasperReports library and JasperReports server.
All right. I'll pick some of the questions, Rafael. Maybe we do an exchange like that. So,
yes.
This microservice, is it an alternative option to Jasper Server? Do you want to take that?
I would say yes. You have the options between the two. Now, what you're getting from JasperReports IO, the microservice, or JasperReports server is different. With the server, you have real web applications with a portal, and we have a repository of all these resources in a repository database. And then because it's a web application, we have a login page, we have users that if you want to embed these reports from JasperReports server, you need to synchronize the users between your application and JasperReports server, but then that allows you to get access to some self-service. So with JasperReports server, you can embed ad hoc designer so that end users, even with no technical knowledge, can navigate through the data, something that you control to data governance, etc., and expose that embedded into your application with the same APIs, the REST, HTTP, Jasper server, or the JavaScript API. So it depends on the use case. With JasperReports IO, you can still have dashboards, but each report will be like a dashlet, and then you print them separately in your page. And then with JavaScript, you can enable drilling and expanding, collapsing dashlet. So you can create dashboards, even though dashboard is more feature that we would refer to as JasperReports server feature. But yeah, there's a difference. We have that exposed on our website, jaspersoft.com, and then we're happy to discuss, demo these server or microservices.
I would also add one aspect. There's a distribution of JasperReports server that has JasperReports IO at scale behind the scenes for scalability of the reporting feature itself. So you can integrate the two if you want to scale up reporting capabilities. All right. I'm taking another question here. Is there a way we can have sorting and filtering in a toolbox out of the box of the embedded reports, either with Visualize or JasperReports IO? Yes, actually, one of the JS fiddles that are there in the documentation shows that we can, trigger functionality, interactivity by making, calls with custom buttons. We tell people, hey, there's so many things you can do. You can put your own buttons, create your own toolbars. But what we oftentimes realize is that people like to embed our own reporting viewer. So we created, if we look at the samples in the gallery, report gallery of JasperIO, we see there a report viewer that looks like Acrobat Reader with navigation buttons and all that stuff. And that's more like for demo purposes, but people would like to embed that one and not have to create their own ways to visualize reports. So let's just say we have both. I mean, we can embed a fully functional Acrobat Reader-like viewer, but people can develop their own interactive features with custom toolbars that control even individual features like filtering and sorting and column hiding and whatever we have there can be triggered with custom buttons and custom toolbars. So the answer is yes.
Very good. Right. I would take the next question. Is this cloud only, or can it be on premise? So actually, anything we've presented today was either running locally or installed on premise. Of course, you can install these tools, whether it's JasperReports IO, the microservice, or JasperReports server. Everything Jaspersoft does can be installed on premise, and we run on Windows, Mac, Linux, as you've seen. We also have Docker definitions or Kubernetes. So if you want to run these in your own container, that's possible. And of course, then we also have partnership with AWS, so you can have that as a service. But generally, Jaspersoft is installed on premise, so you control the security and where it's installed, even if then you make it available to end users publicly.
Right. I'll take another question. Sorry, I'm new to Microservices, so I understand that JasperIO is a JRS deployed in Linux container and can communicate over REST. It's a way of looking at it, but let's just say that JasperReports server, it's much more than the reporting service. I mean, JasperReports server has a scheduler, has multi-tenancy, has data analysis in the form of ad hoc visualization, has much more. With JasperReports IO, we are doing only reporting. And indeed, we offer this only through REST because JasperReports IO microservice itself doesn't have a UI. So it's, I mean, we showed some blue website there with the documentation, but that is just like a demo application. It's not JasperIO itself, because JasperIO itself doesn't have a UI. It's not a turnkey application that you consume normally. It's just a service that you have to call through REST API. So there's some similarities in between JasperReports server and JasperReports IO. Let's just say that the common ground here is the reporting functionality both exposed, but they do it differently and they differ from an architecture point of view. All right.
Very good. I was replying to someone. Yes, we will be sharing the slides after this presentation. I think I actually had one question on JS Fiddle. I'm not too sure about the answer.
Yeah, I wanted to answer that. So the way it works with, I mean, there's
so
a
the
trick.
Question is,
there's a trick there.
we can read the question 5.1. How is your localhost exposed to internet? I mean, JS Fiddle website.
It's a trick there because I worked on it many years ago, so I don't remember exactly how it's done. But with JS Fiddle, we do have this possibility to open it in the browser and have it work with the local IP, let's say. I don't remember how it was done, but it's not necessarily for JS Fiddle to see our service through a public API. It will probably answer to you if you're interested after this call, after this webinar.
Yeah, it's not because I'm presenting JS Fiddle with my own local reports that my computer is exposed to the internet.
Yeah, it's a trick from JS Fiddle that you made use of, but I don't remember exactly what. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, only I can view these. Other people on the internet cannot access these reports. Maybe one more question. I see we are nearly at the end of the hour. Is this only part of Jaspersoft Commercial Edition, not the Community Edition? So the JasperReports IO that we've presented today is indeed part of the Commercial Edition only. So you can try it with the trial, 30-day free trial, and then if you have questions or if you need a bit more time, you can reach out to us and we'll help you with this POC. But then, yes, you will need a supported license. And nowadays, when you want to embed reporting into an application or manipulate users' data and generate lots of invoices, it's definitely a plus to have us behind the scene supporting you, making sure it always works. And so from a legal perspective, from a support perspective, it's important. So we have a secured environment, we update it, upgrade with any kind of security issues, it's updated. So yes, that's not something you get automatically with the community edition. So we keep it commercial edition now. Okay, so we had a lot of questions today. Thank you very much. It was very interactive. Delighted to have presented this to you. And if you want to follow up with us, well, feel free to reach out to us on jaspersoft.com/contact us or to the community forums, or there are different ways to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to answer and help you in discovering microservices and reporting engine through microservices. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Good day or end of your day.